Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart. Today is Wednesday, June 28th, 2023, and have I got a show for you. We have inspirational author Wendy Jo Cerna, and I have to tell you, her books are just amazing. I swear, whenever I start reading the synopsis for her books, her storylines are so original. I do not think I can come up with any book I have ever read that comes close to these stories. And I worked for Barnes & Noble for more than 13 years in the receiving department. I have checked out a lot of books. So when I tell you that I have never seen anything that comes close to these stories, that's actually saying something. So I think we should go ahead and go straight for the interview, and I'm going to save all of my announcements and news for the end. So be sure to stick around to the very end because I have got some very cool things to tell you. But before we do that, let's talk to Wendy Jo Cerna. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this. I love inspirational books. So why don't you give our audience a little bit of an introduction to yourself, who you are, and what you do?
First of all, thanks for having me, Dianne. I'm privileged and honored to be part of your journey and all that you're doing as well. My name is Wendy Jo Cerna, and I live in the Seattle, Washington area, but I was born and raised in Minnesota. So I'm a Minnesota transplant out here to Washington, came out here to finish up my college degree at the University of Washington, which was theater arts, was my undergrad degree. And I met my husband out here, and he's from Washington. And so we stayed, and we have owned a business for 30 odd years, and I've helped off and on with that. But in the last, 7 years, I've started to write books, novels, which I really didn't know I could do, but here I am on my third book. So
what was the inspiration that moved you to write your first book?
Well, that's an interesting story because I never really had thought about writing novels. I mean, I've read voraciously my whole life and always enjoyed fiction to a great degree. I hadn't really thought about writing my own, but as my kids were growing up, I have 3 children who are all adults now, and they were leaving the nest, as kids are supposed to do. Mm-hmm. But I just had more space in my life. And so I was asking, what do I do next? I haven't had a career outside of the home and our business. So I really was a little bit lost. And I felt like as I was praying that the Lord said, well, what do you want to do? Like he threw it back in my court. And honestly, Dianne, it had been so long since anybody had asked me that. When you're a mom, you're doing what everybody else needs to have done, and business, mm-hmm. You do what needs to get done. And then suddenly he was asking, what do you want to do? And I didn't really know. So I also got a master's degree in psychology. I went back to school in my 40s and got that and have done a fair amount of counseling. So I said, I really want to get back to my creative roots, but I also want to do something that's redemptive. I want to do something that binds up the brokenhearted and sets captives free. That was my mission statement of what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know what that entailed until one morning, and this I know sounds odd, but one morning as I have a regular, just quiet moment in the morning with prayer and devotion, and in the quiet, I've heard very clearly, there is a baby catcher gate in heaven.
That sounds really intriguing.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I had no idea. And it was such an other thought. I'd never entertained anything like that. So I knew it was the Lord. And I said, all right, well, interesting. But what do you want me to do with that? And very quickly I heard write a book. And very quickly I said, well, that ought to be interesting because I don't know what you're talking about. And I've never written a book. But he had asked me what I wanted to do. And then I realized, okay, well, maybe this is that thing. But I don't know how to do this at all. So it just became a matter of, faith and obedience to say, well, I guess if you think I can do this, then there must be something in me that is able to do this.
Whenever you explained to your husband, I need to write a book, what was his reaction?
Well, well, my husband's used to me, after we've been married 36 years. And he also saw that I was in a different place in my life. And I think as women, we often live in different seasons a little bit more than men do. But so a different season was opening up. So he was like, you know what? Go for it. He's very supportive. He didn't have a clue how I was going to do it either, but he was very encouraging.
That's always helpful whenever you have encouragement, whenever you're trying something new.
Yes. But I didn't tell anybody, except him.
Yeah.
Nobody needs to know what I'm doing. So yeah, I was very quiet for quite a while.
Whenever you had the first draft done, did you give it to anybody to see what their feedback would be?
Yeah. Well, honestly, it was such an interesting process of writing. I didn't even know if it was for anybody besides me, because I would sit and write. I literally just used a yellow legal pad and a pen, and I would have to pray every time because I didn't know where the story was going. I had to write the story in order to read the story, like what's going to happen next. But it was such an intimate, creative process. And I'm sure a lot of writers feel this way, that there is someone other than you helping the story unfold. Mm-hmm. And it was like creating with the creator, if that makes sense. And I so enjoyed that process that I thought, well, maybe this is just for me to enhance and understand my connection with the Father and opening up new pathways in my spirit and my soul. I didn't know. Mm-hmm. But when I had a first draft done, my mom and my sister-in-law happened to be visiting from Minnesota. And my mom is an English teacher and a poet. So I was a little fear and trembling to show it to her. But my sister-in-law is a voracious reader. So I said, hey, I got this thing. I don't really know if it's good or not. I really don't have any perspective on it. So I gave them the first draft and they devoured it in a day or so. They're both fast readers.
Wow.
And they both said, I don't think it's complete, but it is definitely something you need to pursue because it's very fresh and it's very different. And they both said, no, keep going. So that was very helpful.
So now that first book you published in 2017, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Now, did you go self-publishing, traditional, hybrid?
I did completely self-publishing with Baby Catcher because I didn't know what I was doing. So I honestly just had to go one step at a time with editors. And it's such a different world out there now for publishing that you have opportunities. Anybody can publish a book.
Yeah.
As long as you keep moving forward. So I just did completely self-published with that one. And it took me like 3 years to keep stumbling forward, but eventually got it done.
Why don't you tell us what the Baby Catcher Gate is about?
Well, the protagonist is a 12-year-old girl living in northern Minnesota, where I grew up. And her mother happens to be a midwife who comes from a long line of midwives or baby catchers, as they are known. And the girl doesn't want anything to do with it. She's been around it, she's seen it, and she's really not interested. But she doesn't really know what she wants to do and what her strengths are, as most of us don't when we're 12. But she winds up having to go one night on an emergency call with her mom, and she winds up involved in the delivery. I don't want to give away too much of the plot, but the girl winds up holding the baby and having a heavenly visitation. Like, she carries this child all the way up to the Baby Catcher Gate, which is a place where God receives infants who have passed away. And she gets to see the beautiful, beautiful celebration and care that are given to these wee ones. But then she comes back to Earth and she has a very hard time explaining what she's seen. And no one really believes her. But she begins to be able to draw what she's seen. And that opens up all kinds of interesting things in her family and in her town and in her friends. So, yeah.
That is a very interesting premise. I don't think I've ever heard anything like that.
Right. That's why I have a hard time knowing what is the genre of my book. they are inspirational fantasy, but I hesitate to even use the word fantasy because I think sometimes, I mean, I have a Christian upbringing, Christian worldview, and I think we downplay the supernatural nature of this faith that we say that we espouse, and that there actually are really biblical precedents for these kinds of heavenly encounters and angelic encounters and all those things. So for me, a lot of it is just opening up to the bigness of God and what are the possibilities when you have an all-encompassing, all-knowing supernatural God. So I try to write from that really big space of not putting God in boxes and saying, all right, whatever you want to show me. Because, there is a scripture that says, no eye has seen and no ear has heard, nor has it entered into the hearts of man, the things that God has prepared for those who love him. But then it says, but the Spirit reveals those things to us, even the deep things of God. And so I rely on that. Like, I don't know these things, but I know there are deep things, and I'm really interested in exploring them.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe that whole thing in like 2 or 3 words.
Right?
There seems like there needs to be a new genre that would cover that.
And if you find what that is, Dianne, please let me know.
You had a second book that came out in 2020, and I have to tell you, the synopsis that I read on your website about that one really has me intrigued. I think that one would be like the first one that I would want to read. That was The Agreements.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell people what that one's about?
That one's a real trip. It comes from, I was at a conference with my husband, and the speaker said something that I'd never heard before, and it really bothered me. She said, we've all seen the scroll of our life prior to arriving on the planet, and we've read everything about our lives, and we've agreed to it before we got here. And then when we get here, our job is to remember what we agreed to. That bothered me because I thought, no, there are people with way too hard lives that there's absolutely no way anybody would agree to those things. And so I really wrestled with it. And I felt like, I don't know, it's just an idea that I couldn't let go of. And so I felt like the only way to super process it was to write a story that takes human beings through some of maybe the harder things that you can think of to go through, and also comes out on the redemptive side of why we go through those things. Because, how to explain? It says, again, I'm going to quote scripture, sorry, but it says that Jesus went to the cross for the joy that was set before him. And he endured all that for the joy that was set before him, because he could see the end from the beginning. Like, there's a reason why he went through it, because on the other side of that was redemption, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what if our lives are more like that as well? Like, I know just by reading a bit of your bio that you've been through some very challenging, difficult things with brain surgeries and challenging recovering your life from those things. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, what have you found on the other side of that maybe opened up possibilities or relationships or doors that never, ever would have been there, except that you can say, oh, I actually know what that is to go through that. And the people that you can reach, I can't really reach them with that same level of empathy and understanding that perhaps you can. Now, it's a difficult premise, granted. So that's what that whole book is about. Twin girls born right on the cusp of the millennium in the year 2000, and they're born into New York City. So their family is deeply impacted by the events of 9/11. And their lives get split up and they go in very, very different directions. And so the book follows them on the different courses of their lives and the things that they have to go through or get to go through, and how it all gets worked together for good in the end. But what's interesting too is that in all my books, I have a weird sort of point of view thing that happens, is that I always have an earthly point of view and I have a heavenly point of view. So I have characters talking from both realms back and forth.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So in this one of the main characters is a heavenly being, I don't know, angel, I guess, whose job is to facilitate the reading of those scrolls. Before they go to the planet, they read their scrolls, and he's the one who facilitates if they're going to sign and agree. and gets sent to the planet. He's a facilitator, but his first job is these twin girls, and they sign their names to their documents. And then he reads their entire life stories, and he is perplexed, saying, why on earth would anyone agree to that? And the head designer says, why don't you go down and find out? So his point of view is what we see following their lives, of what they actually go through, and him understanding the depth and the breadth and the height of the human spirit is the journey of the agreements.
See, and I think that is just such a fascinating concept. I really want to read that book of yours.
I know it's a hard concept, but in writing the book, it's settled me on, I don't understand all this, but I'm willing to entertain the idea at least and not reject it entirely. So,
did you also do this one as self-publishing?
I did, but it took me about 2 years because by then I actually had some connections with a few people, editors mainly, that I knew and trusted. And I worked with a different cover designer. And so it went a little more quickly because I had a little bit more of a path that I knew, okay, what's next? So I did self-publish that as well.
Now, your last book actually just came out this past March. And I'm not sure, how do you pronounce the name of that one?
It's Solbakken.
Okay.
Which is a Norwegian name.
And what is that one about?
Solbakken. Well, it's a tale of generations. And Solbakken was the name that my great-grandparents, Norwegian immigrants, named their homestead in northern Minnesota when they came in the early 1900s. It's where my grandparents were married at Solbakken. And it just means, I think in Norwegian, it's Sun Hill. Not like there's many hills in Minnesota. I think it was a slight elevation in the landscaping, but that's where the house was. So Solbakken, a tale of generations. And this one, the concept came from, I was pondering again, a scripture that says that if we choose cursing, that it will affect to the third and fourth generation. But immediately after that, it says, but those who choose life, that there's blessings to 1,000 generations. And I wondered, what are the blessings of 1,000 generations? What does that entail? And what does that look like in my life if I could go back and see the choices that previous generations made, sacrifices and difficult choices and conflicts and all those things that life throws at us. And yet I reap all the benefits. Like they did all the work and I reap all the benefits, maybe long after they're gone. So this story, again, has a little supernatural elements in it, in that the main character this time is a 65-year-old woman named Tora. And she is pondering if her life has really impacted anyone, if she's done anything impactful. And she doesn't really know. She's feeling a little lost, but she gets called. Her grandparents' homestead has been ransacked and burglarized. And it's out in the middle of nowhere, and they don't know what happened or who did it. So she gets called up to northern Minnesota to set things back into place. And it's a home that's been lived in continually for over 100 years. So there's a lot of stuff in there, but it's all been scattered all over the place. And so she has to literally put her hands on like everything that's in that house. And as she does, she begins to connect some of the dots of the storyline of her family tree. And she begins to have dreams that take her back and forth across the centuries. And she begins to actually see who some of these people were and why she lives the way she lives, and how maybe we have a misinformed idea of what impact really is, that maybe it's not always the big things that we do in life, but there's a lot of little choices that we make that send ripples across the years as well. So
the concepts that you have in these stories are just amazing and totally original. I mean, people are always saying that there are no more original stories, but I'm a voracious reader. I did a lot of reading from childhood up.
Yeah.
There is nothing that I can think of in my history that I have come across that come close to these stories. They're very original.
I know. Well, people ask me, what are they like? I'm like, well, let's think about that. You know, when I was a kid, I loved big wild adventure stories like Pippi Longstocking or A Wrinkle in Time, and some of those
Oh, yeah.
that sort of, I don't know if bent your mind, but expanded your mind to think about new possibilities. And so I guess maybe I have a little bit of a bent that direction. But these are, like I said, unexpected to me as well. And all three books have been, at least for me individually, just explorations of concepts that I really didn't understand. So it's me processing my life. That's my books.
So I'm just really blown away by the synopsis of these. Just so original.
Well, I'd love to take credit for it all, but honestly, I like the first one, it literally was out of the blue. There's a baby catcher gate in heaven. What does that have to do with anything? So like I say, I try to keep really open to the spirit and say, what do you want to write about? Is there something? And then when I hit on an idea that I can't shake, I can't get rid of it, then I feel like I get a green light to say, why don't you explore that with 120,000 words? I know it's a little bit different. It's hard to explain sometimes, but I have readers, once they pick one up, they get excited about the next one because it is so other than what most readers experience. So,
have you done any meet and greets where you get to go out and actually talk to some of your fans about your work?
I have been invited to some book clubs, and that has been very, very humbling because you get to see how people are impacted by your story. That's pretty cool. I really enjoy that a lot, interacting with the readers and hearing their stories. My stories just sort of put their finger on tender spots oftentimes. And I have found that it allows people to open up to me about the difficult things in their lives. And I'm telling you, boy, people are amazing. The things that they've gone through and how they come out the other side with such grace and determination and wisdom. So I'm very honored that people open up to me because they feel like I've opened something up to them. So, when I say on my website that these are stories that expand the heart and the mind and the spirit, empower the spirit, enlarge the heart, that's really what I find when I talk to my readers, that that's the experience they've had in reading my books.
I think that's a great description. So now this is the point of the show that we do the 5 quick questions that usually are not very quick, but we're going to give it a shot.
Okay. Give her a go.
So question 1, what is your favorite book from childhood?
Oh, well, I think I just mentioned a couple of them. I really loved the whole Pippi Longstocking series, Villa Villa Kula and all of that. I thought it was fantastical and an adventure. And I read a lot as a kid, and we had a lot of books in our home. My mom was an English teacher and a poet, and so words and books were readily available in our households. My brothers read all of the mystery novels and the Hardy Boys and all those, but I don't know. My imagination is a little too vivid, maybe. And if I read those, I didn't sleep very well. So those were banned by my mother. Like, no, you're not reading these because I'm not coming up in the middle of the night. So that's me.
Question 2, when you are reading, which do you prefer? Paperbacks, hardcovers, ebooks, or do you prefer audiobooks?
I have different applications for each one of those. My biggest preference is just a good paperback. I like to hold things in my hands. I like to flip the pages, all that sensory sort of stuff. But if I'm traveling, I'm happy to have an ebook because I don't have to tote a book.
Yeah.
And then I've really gotten into audiobooks over the last, 5 years. I find I've listened to a lot of books that I maybe wouldn't have picked up and read. Like, I've listened to a lot of classics, Charles Dickens stuff. I listened to The Count of Monte Cristo, which is like 52 hours long, FYI. But really fascinating. I'd only ever seen the movie of it, which is like maybe 2.5 hours long. So clearly a lot more to that book than what the movie can capture. So I like all of them in different platforms. I don't know. I also have what I like to call my presidential library, which is biographies of all of the presidents and their first ladies. I don't have all of them yet, but a fair number of them. And most of those are hardback for whatever reason. They're deemed important enough, I guess. So those are kind of my heavy duty books that honestly I read in the middle of nights to get back to sleep. Because Because I find that this is maybe not good, but nonfiction tends to put me to sleep and fiction tends to keep me up. So I have to choose wisely if I'm reading in the middle of the night.
That makes sense to me, though.
Good. I'm glad that you can understand that.
Question 3. When you're writing, do you prefer it to be quiet or do you need a noisy background with the radio or TV or something going in the background?
No, I need quiet. I didn't know this about myself until I started writing, that I need to be able to hear my own voice in my own head. Like I hear what I'm writing. I didn't know that till I tried to I thought, oh, this will be fun. I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll sit and bring my laptop and write. No, because A, there's people there talking, but B, they pipe in so much music.
Mm-hmm.
You don't notice it until you're trying to be quiet and you think, no, I can't do it. And when I was writing the agreements, even in my own household, there was so much going on with business coming and going. I had to get in my car and drive to a quiet spot with my laptop in order to shut the noises of the world out so I could hear my characters talk in my head. A little extreme, but it's what I had to do. So yes, I need quiet.
I'm thinking soundproofing would come in handy.
Right? Yeah, no, I know, like a padded room maybe somewhere.
I think most writers need that.
Yeah. I know it sounds like a vacation, kind of sadly enough, but yeah.
Considering how you get your story ideas, do you consider yourself to be more of a pantser or a plotter? Because the way that you describe it, it seems like it's more fluid.
Oh, it's very fluid. I have no idea where it's going when I start. Like I said, I have a big overarching sort of scenario, a theme, but I don't know how it's going to play out. So I'm definitely a pantser. I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
Now I know, and that's what people say. Okay. I kind of just write wildly into the night and step off a cliff every time I start. And so I do write with a bit of fear and trembling because I'm like, I don't know if is it going to keep going? Am I going to know? Is there more words coming? Every time I'm a little terrified, but it keeps me interested. That's for sure.
Have you ever tried to plot it?
No, you know what? I never have because it sort of stifles me. Now, I envy those who can plot it, and I think it's fantastic. I wish I was, well, I shouldn't say that. I envy their ability to do that, but that's not been my experience. So
I'm right there with you. I have tried a few times to plot out my books, and it's like the characters in my head just start laughing, going, no, we're not doing that.
Exactly. You think you know where this is going, lady.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, question 5. Interviews. Do you love them or do you dread them?
I really like them. I really like chatting with people I don't know that are interested in similar things. I love connecting with other authors and readers. We're a different breed, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy it. I enjoy what gets drawn out, and I enjoy interviewing other people too.
Because you do have your own podcast.
I do. I haven't interviewed on the podcast yet because it's been like an audio blog. I don't know what else to call it, of the whole process of writing a book and self-publishing. Because I don't know about you, Dianne, but I run into a lot of people when they find out I've written a book. And the first thing they'll say is, oh, I've always wanted to do that, or I know I'm supposed to do that, but they don't. And so in asking people why they don't, a lot of times it's just because they're intimidated by the process and they don't know what it entails. And not the writing so much as the editing and all the little hoops you got to jump through to get your book finally out onto the market. So my podcast is, so God told you to write a book. Now what? So it's all about the now what, and it's practical, it's inspirational, but it's just me talking about what I was up to that week or that month or whatever in the journey of actually getting Soulbuck and up and out of my gut and into a written format and the e-format. And I'm now actually working on the audio version myself, recording that too. But you know what? I think the next season that I do, if I do another season, not set on that yet either, but if I do, I just want to interview other people about what was the process they went through, what was the journey they went through, because it's quite a journey to get a book all the way through to the finish line. It's a journey.
I've interviewed quite a few different authors from all different kinds of genres now.
Yeah.
And usually everybody has the same thing. The easiest part about writing the book was writing it. It
Yeah.
was all the other stuff that gave them anxiety. The writing part was not the problem.
Yeah. That's been my experience too. And yet each aspect of it is such a learning curve. Writing is a big learning curve, but then when you go through the whole editing and realize how much there is to learn from editors, I am very thankful for people who are good editors. I have become such a better writer because of the things that they pinpointed and encouraged me to change or to look at or challenge me in different ways. And, I don't know about you, but when I would get my edits back, it would be not happy days for a few days of, you've got to be kidding. What? I don't know why they would say that and blah, 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 blah. And then I've learned to just set it aside for about a week and then go back and read them again. And then you go, oh, by golly, they have a point. Maybe I should look at that. So I really appreciate the editors in my world. But I also learned how to format my books. And that's a whole learning curve too. But I enjoyed having my fingers on that because maybe that's a control freak. I don't think I'm a control freak, but I like being able to have a little bit of say about what does that actually look like when someone's holding it in their hands. And then recently, with Solbach, and I actually connected with Square Tree Publishing, which is, I guess you would call it a hybrid publishing house, in that they offer all the services that you would need, editing and copy editing and cover design and all that, and some marketing as well. But you retain all of the rights for royalties and copyright and all that. So it's hybrid, but it's nice to have a team.
Yeah.
Behind you. This was the first time I've done that from start to end. And that was actually, I really enjoyed the collaborative effort on that. That was a little bit different and I will do it again.
Yeah, it can be exhausting sometimes having to be in charge of everything.
Right?
It's like, because we just want to write. We want to write our stories.
I just want to write and have somebody else read it. How can it be that hard?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now, where can people find your books?
They're originally all up on Amazon. The only one on Audible so far is The Baby Catcher Gate, but I'm working on the other two this summer. I've also got, I think you can get them at Barnes & Noble and most anywhere now if you request them. So they're out there.
And I will be sure and have links to all of your social media in the description of the podcast so that people can find you easily.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you think that the listeners need to know?
Oh, gosh, that's a broad question, Dianne. Don't get me started. No, I think we've covered what we need to about my books. I appreciate your time and your interview expertise. You have a nice way of drawing people out. I've listened to quite a few of your episodes and really enjoy all the different genres and the different authors that you interview. You do a beautiful job with this. So I appreciate what you do as well. Thanks, Dianne.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, part of the thing is being over here in Germany, I don't get to sit and talk with a lot of people.
Right.
So this is my opportunity to chat. So I really enjoy it.
But you do all the editing and all that yourself too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I am a control freak. So
Admit
it feeds my soul.
Yeah. It's good. I'm really thankful for the day and age we live in, as crazy as it is, that there's these options. Like I'm talking to you in Germany, I'm in Seattle, and we can have this conversation and your voice can get out there just as much as anybody else who wants to put a podcast out or put a book out. But there's just so many possibilities open that used to be much more closed world, I think, as music and books and journalism and all that was just very specific avenues. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, wow, the doors are wide open if you want to kick them down. So
well, it's like the one thing that I'm really surprised about whenever I go onto my podcast host site, there is a page that I can go where there's a map that shows, what countries people are listening from.
Yeah.
And people are listening from every continent. And I'm just like, seriously? People are on every continent are listening to me talk?
Isn't that amazing though? That's just remarkable.
It blows my mind every time I go and look at that.
I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing.
Now I got to just make sure that I always have something good to say.
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah.
The one thing I always try and focus on is that everything is always positive and uplifting and inspirational and making people want to just connect more.
Yeah. No, people are hungry for that. Absolutely. There's enough crazy elements in our world today that we need voices that lift us up for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. That's one reason why I always end every podcast with telling people to go out and be happy. Find something to do today that makes you happy, that feeds your soul.
Yeah.
We need to focus on those things.
Yep. You're right.
I have really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. Whenever you have your next book ready to come out, I would love it for you to come back.
And I would love to come back. Right now, it's sort of like asking a woman who's just had a baby, are you going to have any more? Like, no, let me think about that first.
See, I need to recover from the last one.
Exactly. So we'll see. I'm open to the possibility, but right now I'm not so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It was my privilege. I appreciate it. Thank you, Diane.
So there you have my interview with Wendy Jo Cerna, inspirational author. And I have to tell you, if you have not checked out her books yet, you need to go do that because they are so imaginative and unique. You do not want to pass up this opportunity. And now I want to go back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast, that I have some news. If you have been following along to my podcast or my website and the books that I write as Stephen Burkhart, the Into the West Saga serial, you know I have been struggling for a long time with finishing up the final book in that saga, Into the West Family Ties. Thanks to Natasha Dean, my interview that I had just a few days ago, she will be coming up in the lineup in the next few weeks. She checked in with me after our interview and was asking me, how's the book coming? Did you finish it? It gave me like that last little kick in the pants that I needed to have the inspiration to go and finish it. Then whenever I was struggling and thinking, okay, I need to go do the dishes, I need to take out the trash, I need to make dinner, my husband just kept saying all weekend long, no, go sit at the computer, finish this. I will take care of everything else. And he did. Even though the man works like 12-hour days, he took over, did everything around the house for the weekend, and let me just sit down and finish it. So I'm happy to report I have finished the very first draft of Into the West Family Ties. Tonight and tomorrow, I'm sitting down and doing my first read through. Then I'm going to be sending it off to my beta readers and having them check it out. And then after they're done with it and I make some notes and corrections from their recommendations, it goes to my professional editor, Greg Wood. And after that is done and I put those corrections in, we will be publishing. So it'll probably be coming out the end of July because I want to be doing some new designs on the covers and make it all look a little bit more interesting. And I'm also going to be changing around the titles of the book because right now they're all Into the West, The Orphan Train, or Family Ties, or whatever. I'm going to change the titles around so that it just says The Orphan Train, Family Ties, whatever. Then under that, it will say the first book in the Into the West Saga serial. So it's going to clean up the covers a little bit more, but the text is all going to be the same. So if you have all the other books, don't worry about it. They're all going to be the same text. It's just me messing with the covers. And I will put Into the West Family Ties out in 2 versions. One that will match all the other ones that have already been out. So if you want the final book to match the ones that you have, I'm going to do that. But then I'm also going to do another one with the new covers too. So I want to have this all ready to go at the same time to kind of celebrate the end of this saga, and everything will come out when I publish this final book. And I am going to put this up as a pre-order so that people can go ahead and make your order, and the day that it's released, you should be getting it. And I really, truly want to ask all of you, if you have plans to buy this 7th book, please do it as a pre-order so that all of the orders can drop on the same day. Because just selling 25 books in a single day has the potential in my category of Westerns and historical fiction of getting my book onto the paid bestsellers list. And while I will not be making a lot of money off of that, seriously, it's kind of sad because they've also just increased the printing costs on Amazon. So unless I raise my prices, I'm going to be making less of a profit now. And right now, I really don't want to raise my prices, so I'm just going to end up with less of a profit. But my goal here is just to have as many books dropping on the same day as possible, so I have the potential of getting up on a paid bestsellers list. My books have been number one in their category a couple of times as a free giveaway book, but they have never gotten up there as a paid book. And I really, truly want to get one of these books on the paid bestsellers list, because that is really going to get a lot more attention for my books, in the entire series. So if you have any interest in buying this book, please do the pre-order. I would greatly appreciate that. And I'm still kind of going back and forth. I was talking to another one of the people that I just recently interviewed, Ann Charles, and her interview will be coming up in a week. I was talking to her after our interview about the books that I want to write next, because I want to write my book about my brain surgeries and do a nonfiction autobiography about what it was like to have the accident that caused the problem and going through the discovery of what was the problem and all of the surgeries, having 7 surgeries in 6 months and 6 of them being brain surgeries and dying at one point, and then the years of recovery. And the other book is my FBI profiler thriller that I have been wanting to do for so long. And I haven't been able to decide which one I want to do. And so Ann Charles asked me, can you do 2 books at once? And I started thinking about this. With one being fiction and one being nonfiction, I might actually be able to balance that out. I want to try spending 1 week focused on the fiction book and then the next week focused on the nonfiction book, and see if I can balance that back and forth and get them both done at the same time, because I really want to get them both out to you. But we'll see. I'm going to give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll let you know. But that's it for today, folks. I hope you really enjoyed this interview. Go out and try some new books by Wendy Jo Cerna. And while you're at it, go out and be happy.